I am a trained therapist and life coach, and I help women to remove the blocks and barriers in their lives so that they can thrive, essentially. Let's get those barriers out of the way so that you can live a life filled with meaning and purpose. And so today I wanted to talk about transforming your pain. And I'm going to start with a quote by Elizabeth Gilbert. If you know who Elizabeth Gilbert is, she is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, a bunch of other books. She's an amazing author and writer. And you're going to hear some sounds because, listen, we're all home. So I want to start with the quote. She says that never waste your suffering. If you don't transform your pain, you've suffered for no reason. And I love that quote, and I go back to it often, and it's sort of like the foundation for me when things get hard and I experience different things in my life. And when I think about that quote, I think about like not allowing things to just go in vain, right? And again, so our focus for today is why it's so important to transform your pain. But the very first thing, before you even move to the process of why it's important, you must first recognize that pain is inevitable. That's something that we all know. There is no escaping it. Pain is inevitable. It's like the old Buddhist quote that says, pain is inevitable, however, suffering is optional, right? And I used to, when I was first like a budding new social worker in the field, I used to think like, my goal in life was to eliminate suffering. I didn't want anyone to suffer. But I was wrong. And it took me a while to understand that, because pain is part of the human experience, and it's what differentiates us from the other more primitive animals, right? It makes us unique. And it's pain something that you can't really avoid. Like if you're a human on this earth, you cannot avoid pain. You know, people will try their best to avoid feeling their pain, and they'll substitute it for a whole bunch of other things, right? Distractions and things that don't serve you. But here's the thing about pain, you know, whether you initiate the transformation or not, it's gonna happen. It goes into our bodies, the pain. It goes into our language, our thoughts, how we interact with people, how we interact with ourselves. And so it will seep into you subconsciously. And so the question here is, you know, are you going to control the passage of that pain? Because we can control it at some point, right? Maybe not immediately when things are fresh and the wounds are fresh. But at some point, you're going to be faced with a decision that says that you must decide how much longer you're going to remain in your painful emotions. And now that you know that pain is inevitable and that's not going anywhere, you know, what can you do about it? Well, you learn to manage it, and then you transform it, right? And there's a whole process that, and everybody's on a different journey. And sometimes it takes a little while. It's not linear. It can be a little bit messy. But know that you can transform it. But what gets in the way is when we resist what naturally evolves in our lives. And what I mean by this, for example, let's take relationships, because it's just a classic topic to use. You know, if we get into a relationship with someone, and you know, some of them are successful, some not so much, but that's the natural process of getting to know someone, right? Sometimes we often think like, you know, this is it, or this is, but everything has a beginning and everything has an end, you know, whether we want to admit it or not. And although that could be a painful admission for folks, you know, recognize that there are endings, recognize that there are beginnings, that there are ebbs and flows. But when we resist the inevitable, we create even more suffering in our lives. And it's that resistance that really keeps us shackled to a lot of our pain, and that's why we suffer. So let's circle back to Elizabeth's quote when she says, never waste your suffering. If you don't transform your pain, you've suffered for no reason, right? And a lot of us walk around with our painful traumas, not realizing how we can use some of that story to transform our lives. You can transform your painful experiences into acts of courage. But many of us, we tend to jump from one painful experience to the next, not taking a moment to reflect on what the lessons are, right? I'm going to give you an example. Let's take a look at Frida Kahlo. So when I was in Mexico months ago, I went to Frida Kahlo Museum, which is her house where she built her art. If you don't know who Frida Kahlo is, please go look her up. She's amazing. So the works of Kahlo hauntingly depict both the excruciating physical and also the psychological pain she experienced throughout much of her lifetime. And so if you've watched the movie, go ahead and watch the movie. It's really good. And it talks about like how, she had a deforming childhood illness, and then later a disfiguring accident, which led to her having chronic pain. And so the psychic scars of her tumultuous marriage and then a social revolution, so when the women's movement, all that started taking place, a lot of stuff was going on in Kahlo's life. And Kahlo takes unimaginable circumstances and transforms them into what are now known as renowned works of art. And now a lot of her art is used in therapeutic tools. So for example, much of Kahlo's work has been used by psychologists to empower women to talk about their experiences of physical and emotional pain. And so artistic expression and exploration are valuable. They're invaluable tools in cases of trauma. How does one reconcile that the same hand that betrays, wounds, and abuses is also the one that they need the most, right? And I always talk about duality and living in duality, and how getting comfortable with duality will help you really just manage the circumstances of life, right? And last week when I did my live, I talked about resilience. And there's so many stories of people who, despite their immeasurable suffering, take that deep pain, that deep sense of loss, and transform it into a transformational and impactful moment. In other words, they regain meaning, they find meaning in their lives, right? So as difficult as whatever painful experience that you have endured or that you're currently enduring, it's like, what is this experience trying to teach me? Even some horrific experiences. Is it trying to teach me patience? Is it trying to teach me self-love? Is it trying to teach me gratitude? It's hard to know in that moment, right? When everything is heightened at some point, and it's hard to find the meaning in your pain in that moment. But as time progresses and you're moving through life, there's so much wisdom that we can gain in our suffering, from our suffering. So my goal for this video is to encourage you to change your perspective, so that suffering isn't the only narrative that you tell. Okay? So again, just to recap, it is possible to transform your pain. Give yourself time, grace, and self-compassion. So I'll be back next week, next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Feel free to go on defyingresistance.com. I do a lot of writing on that site. Feel free to sign up for my newsletter where I get a little bit more intimate. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for watching. My name is Francis. Until next time. Bye.